What I do every day is help startup founders and CEOs. I also help capital allocators and high net worth individuals. So startup founders is pretty clear. Capital allocators is anyone from venture capitalists to folks who may have come into large sums of wealth and they're trying to figure out what exactly do we do with that. So what do we do at Veritas Global? As a law firm, I help startup founders. I work with general partners and limited partners. For example, if you're a founder and you're trying to raise venture capital, you're talking to people who are referred to as general partners. They're the general partners of the fund that they run. I also work with limited partners. So limited partners would be high net worth individuals or institutions who are investing in said funds. And when I say I help those people, I basically do all sides of those transactions, from structuring the fund for the general partners or management companies, as well as company side, which would be you as a founder talking with VCs trying to raise capital. So what I'm gonna do today is kind of give you all a brief overview of how these funds are structured, why they're set up the way they're set up, and some context effectively for you as a founder, or if you're in the VC space, but you may not really understand how your fund was structured and why it's set up the way it's set up. And then I'm also gonna do something at the very end on the high net worth family office space and connect things here to Seattle. So if y'all are ready, tell me you're ready. Invisible flows of capital. So I have here some context of three individuals. You've got a founder, you've got a fund manager, and you've got a high net worth individual. The founder is pretty straightforward. A fund manager, as we mentioned, this could be venture capital, this could be private equity, this could be hedge funds, this could be anything from investing in the next Google or the next Facebook to investing in crypto and that sort of thing, because those are all the same structures. And then high net worth could be anything from an NBA player, somebody who inherited a bunch of wealth, or even hit the lottery, that sort of thing. Each of these types of persons are a part of what is basically a capital stack. Most founders would say, I need to raise X amount of money, but folks don't necessarily understand the context. And so what I wanna do first is kind of break down from a founder's perspective a couple of things that folks should keep in mind here if you're in the room and you are either working on a startup or you're planning to work with a startup, or even if you're a VC and you're working with startups to kind of help you educate them. Are you pitching the right VC? Some VCs invest in crypto, some VCs invest in healthcare tech, some invest in consumer staples, some invest in technology-based startups, some only invest in the United States, some invest globally. With all these things in mind, that's where that question is prompting. When you're trying to raise funding, you need to understand who is your audience. And so a lot of times what I've observed is folks may have the raw ambition of wanting to understand, look, I need to raise a lot of money, and kind of knocking down a ton of doors and pitching, and you may not be getting anywhere. And one big thing you can do to help yourself is understanding what your particular startup might be and who that target venture capital fund or angel investor group might be. Because as I started off, everyone doesn't invest in everything. And so you can improve your hit rate by just understanding that from the start. Next, how big is your TAM? TAM stands for total addressable market. If we're talking specifically about venture capital, we are in Seattle, which is a hub for venture capital, the home of Microsoft and Amazon, etc. These were companies, as an example, that started off as founder funded, family and friend funded, and then subsequently venture capital funded. When you go to have a conversation with a venture capitalist or a fund, they are thinking about what is the TAM. And I'll give you an example. If I am starting a global social network that anybody can access on the internet, there are roughly 7.9 billion people on the planet. Of that, about 4 billion have the internet. Therefore, your TAM would be roughly 4 billion people, or everyone with a cell phone. Another example, if I'm in a small town or even a larger city, and let's say I'm starting a chicken restaurant, your TAM in that case is going to basically be limited to that town. And unless you were to go franchise and scale up and become like a McDonald's, that's not something that a venture capitalist is going to be interested in, at least initially. And the reason is their mandates. Venture capitalists are trying to hit global home runs. They're looking at companies that can potentially be IPOs. The secondary benefit would be potentially a merger and acquisition situation, meaning if you can't make an IPO, let's say a Microsoft or an Amazon will buy your startup out. But typically when a VC is deciding in a committee, should we invest in X or Y company, they're trying to figure out, is the TAM something that's large enough such that we can hit a real home run and be the next Facebook, the next Google, the next Coinbase? It's important to understand before you even prepare any kind of documentations to talk to VCs, do I fit in one of these two categories? Fortunately, most VCs will be nice and won't necessarily shut the door in your face, but you may not get a response because from their perspective, they're looking at thousands of pitches a week. And if you're not within their categories, they're just gonna be on to the next thing. You can do yourself a lot of favor by kind of thinking through and preparing in advance of talking to these type of folks.